Beauty often talks about change, changing skin, changing routines, changing confidence. But some people are trying to use beauty to change something far bigger. They're trying to protect plants and restore habitats and fight for species that are disappearing at an alarming rate. And they're not doing this because it's profitable or easy. They're doing this because someone has to care enough to try. So let's take butterflies as an example. Beautiful, fragile, and deeply symbolic of the health of our ecosystems. And monarch butterflies in particular are in serious trouble. Habitat loss, development, climate pressures, it's all adding up. And while most of us admire butterflies and moths from a distance, there are people out there on the ground who are planting, protecting, and arguing with councils, showing up at meetings, raising awareness, and doing whatever they can to stop these majestical insects from vanishing altogether. And today's conversation is with one of those people. This is someone who has tried to use beauty as a way to fund conservation and raise awareness and keep the spotlight on a species that is running out of time. And I'm going to be honest with you, as you will hear, this is not a glossy success story. Instead, it's a raw, honest look at what it means to put nature first and to keep going with a mission that's bigger than yourself and to use beauty not as an end goal, but as a means to make the world a little better than we found it. Welcome to Green Beauty Conversations, in which I challenge the beauty industry to become sustainable, champion independent and green beauty, and encourage you to join me in making beauty better. I'm your host, Lorraine Dallmeier. I'm a chartered environmentalist, biologist, and the CEO of award-winning online organic cosmetic formulation school, Botanika. We have tens of thousands of students in over 190 countries around the world who study with us to become organic beauty formulators and entrepreneurs. Visit our website at formulavotanica.com to try our free online formulation course. And if you want to be the first person to know what's happening in green beauty, make sure you subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app. So in today's episode, I'm joined by Chris Amendt, the founder of Native Monarchs and Monarch Botanica, and a dedicated advocate for the natural world with a particular focus on monarch butterfly conservation. Chris trained as a cytotechnologist, and she spent more than 2 decades in medical diagnostics, specializing in the identification of abnormal and cancerous cells. But despite a successful career in medicine, Chris felt a growing pull to create meaningful environmental impact, inspired by a childhood shaped by her grandmother, Grammy Betty, who fostered a deep respect for wildlife through hands-on exploration of butterflies, birds, and plants. And that early grounding in science and curiosity and care for the natural world ultimately became the foundation for her mission-driven work at the intersection of conservation, education, and beauty. Hi, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Lorraine, thanks for having me.
I am really pleased that you're here. I think your mission and everything you're doing is fascinating, and I know our listeners want to hear everything about you as well. So let's start with some introductions. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Chris Amendt. I am the founder of, first of all, Native Monarchs, which is a nonprofit that's dedicated to not only creating monarch habitat and on a conservation level, and we can get into this later, but protection of monarch habitats, the existing monarch habitats that are around us. I started this mission back during the pandemic when pretty much everything was shut down. There was, and it also coincided with the lowest count of monarch, the Western monarch count on record. So I'm also a volunteer. We go out, we count them every year. We get out a population number. And it was one of the years that not only were there a lot of fires, there was a lot of smoke, but, the habitat loss is the main driver. And what we're finding is that, we can't find these monarchs when we're trying to count them for population counts. So that's when I thought I needed to do something. I had been a landscaper, a gardener. I came from the medical industry, so I was familiar with biological issues, what was happening with the monarch as far as being an insect and the threats it faced. So it just so happened that a golf course, I'm an avid golfer, a golf course that I know the owners, I asked them if I could build a monarch habitat while everything was shut down because there was no play, nobody was coming through there, and they agreed to it. So they said, yeah, as long as you do it, you plant the plants, you raise the money, you take care of it. They ended up helping me in the end, but it actually became this great project that as soon as we brought the right plants in, it turned into a full-on breeding habitat and we need to do more of that.
Yes, that's super exciting. Well, first of all, congratulations on the success that you've seen there. So that is your non-profit arm, Native Monarchs, but you've also got a beauty brand. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So that kind of happened in tandem, but at the same time, the native milkweed is the only plant that the Monarch can survive on. And it's all over the country here in the US. There's different varieties. You got to pick the right variety for your area. The thing was, I was creating these habitats and I couldn't find enough plants from nurseries. A lot of times the plants have systemics in them. So it's already not an organic level and not the greatest for Monarch. So I decided to start growing it myself. Long story short, I found a greenhouse. I started growing the plants, and then as we started doing like germination tests, I found that a lot of the seeds were a low germination rate. So we kind of pushed those aside and said, okay, well, we're going to focus on the ones that do better. These seeds, I had a surplus of these seeds and I was trying to make something out of it. I was like, well, maybe this could be a fertilizer or something like that. But when I started researching it even more, I found that you could cold press a really great moisturizing oil from it. And coming from my medical background, I ran it through all the tests. I made sure there was nothing toxic, no allergens. It's a really great omega-6, 9, 7 oil. At the time, I thought this is my no-brainer. I was like, I will make a product out of this to fund my nonprofit and to help use it as a conservation tool for the mission. And then put all the information on there so people could, it's a commercial product, but you can get your message out there with something physical.
I love that so much, to use one arm to sort of feed the other and vice versa. What sort of products do you make and sell?
The first products that I started making was a facial moisturizer and a facial cleanser. It was kind of like, at the time, it was right before the pandemic shutdown of manufacturing. So I had come up with the formula. I actually purchased the formula from the cosmetics manufacturer, which I kind of thought in the long run would have been, something I would have control over. So those were my first two products out. But as soon as I got on the line to start basically filling the tubes, the pandemic shut down manufacturing all over. So I was actually delayed about 8 months, almost a year, before I could get the product finished. And that was a problem because, everything that I started sourcing out in the beginning came back a lot more expensive. I ran out of money. I had no money for marketing, but I got it through. And this is coming from I came from the medical field. I didn't have any background in manufacturing, the beauty industry, everything that was like, I knew nothing about is what I tried to jump in and do. So that was a lesson learned.
I love that though. And how's it been working out so far? I mean, obviously you want to use the beauty brand to support the nonprofit. How's that working?
I'd say it's been like 2 or 3 years now into it, and it's tough. Mm-hmm. It is tough. I picked an industry that is super saturated, super competitive. And one thing, I guess, is the differentiation between me and say other brand owners is that I cannot fathom spending anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 for a marketing campaign when I can put plants in the ground. And that's my difference. I am mission oriented. I am Monarch first. And I said, well, I've got this far. I've invested this much money. I need to do what I can in the most economical way I can and try to get the message out there. The product's been really well received. I go to vendor shows all the time. I give out samples. But as far as, having a big boom of sales, that just hasn't come yet.
But do all the profits from the beauty brand then go into the nonprofit? How do you combine the two?
So what I did is, this is in the beginning, and it's kind of changed now because of certain events that happened. But right in the beginning, I took 5% of all profits and then put it right to the nonprofit. So I was like, okay, 5% is good. That's a good start. But when the sales were down so low, it didn't really make a difference. So just recently, what I've noticed is I think I want to use it more as make a donation because really Monarchs are running out of time. We just had 2 really big announcements that the Western Monarch is the 3rd lowest in history. the federal government has decided to delay any protections for the Monarch for a year or more. So I can't wait for federal protections to come in. And I'm in California. Recently, one of the overwintering sites in California, the property owner started to cut down those trees without a permit, without approval from the city. I started kind of like fighting that to save that spot. They took out about 8 trees. There's a bunch left, but it's on a private property. So the difference is it's in the coastal zone. You need permits, and they didn't have permits. So I switched gears and I said, I don't have the bandwidth to keep marketing the beauty product myself and fight this fight. And so what I basically did is I kind of paused sales right now at the end of the year. The remaining inventory that I have, I donated it to my nonprofit. And then now what I'm doing is a campaign donation where people that donate directly to the mission, and 100% of those donations go right to the nonprofit. Then they receive a thank you gift in the form of the Monarch Botanica facial care kit.
Amazing. It's not an easy thing to do, to try and fight the battle and run a company at the same time. So I have a lot of respect for what you're doing. And I'm sure your customers do too. I mean, they must really be invested in not only the products, but the mission. What sort of feedback do you get from people?
I get great feedback. Not only do I have habitats all over Ventura County here in Southern California and outside of certain counties where I meet people and they can understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing that. But when I talk to them about this mission and what I'm doing, that's when people are, how can I help? How can I, show up and, support you in events that you're doing? What can we do? City council meetings to show up every week to try to get answers and try to put protections into place for monarch habitat. That's where I'm really getting a lot of help and a lot of support.
And I guess the answer to how can I help is, first of all, donate to the nonprofit, but also just buy the beauty products, right? So,
yeah, I have both options are open. It's whatever you choose, however you want to make basically your contribution. If you're a monarch advocate, that's your choice. It's either, you purchase it or you make a donation, but either way, honestly, I am taking all that money and I'm putting that back into the mission because it's to the point where we have to do something now, or even if we stay the same, the monarchs are probably going to be extinct by the year 2080. And that deadline is coming up faster.
Yes, biodiversity conservation is a struggle for sure. And it needs people like you who are out there sort of fighting the good fight, but also raising awareness, which is hopefully what some of this podcast will be able to do as well. I just want to talk about the ingredient for a minute. You mentioned milkweed earlier. What is milkweed seed oil? Let's talk through that a little bit, because many of our listeners, they love their natural ingredients, but they may not have come across this one before.
Sure. No, it is very unique. And actually, when we were running through the manufacturing, there was no official listing, from either the FDA that we could actually say, okay, we're going to use this oil. So, but what it is the milkweed plant, which I said is, 100%, the survival of monarchs depend on it. But once a year before the plant goes dormant, it will push out seed pods. And it'll bloom, it'll push out seed pods, and then it'll pretty much go dormant on the top where the plant looks like it's dead. But the rhizomes will keep growing underneath the surface of the ground. So we harvest these seeds for propagation, mostly for propagation purposes. That's what it is. But over the years, milkweed farmers have been stashing these seeds, keeping them as inventory. And then a lot of times it's like 2-3 years in, then they have a surplus, then they get rid of it. Then they bring the new surplus in. Unfortunately, as farmers, milkweed farmers have realized that if there's not a market for something coming from the milkweed plant, they will change over to something else. Soy, corn, anything like that. So that was part of my drive was to get this milkweed seed oil to market, that kind of a mission. I needed to figure out, okay, how good is this oil that I could put it in different products? But cold pressing it's just basically, it's a physical press. We're taking these leftover seeds. Sometimes they can be up to 5-6 years old. As long as we keep them dry, they are a great source of this oil. Unfortunately, you don't get a lot of oil from it. It's not like a jojoba seed where it has a big percentage of oil. It has a very small percentage of oil. But that oil, it goes a long way. When you put some of it in a product, and when I put this in my facial moisturizer and I put it in the facial cleanser in a little bit different percentages, it was surprising what a small amount you could put in there, and it could be such a different feel, the longevity of an oil and the stability of an oil. It's a very, very stable oil.
Sounds beautiful. Are you cold pressing it yourself?
No, I'll source out the seed but it's something that I'm looking into, because in Canada, where the milkweed farmers are, a lot of times they have surplus. And rather than throw that seed away, I would rather purchase that seed. And it's a great story. It's a full circle of materials that we can use.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think you probably have time to cold press milkweed seeds as well.
I want to. I've done my little experimentations, with it, with little presses. But, if I'm going to invest into doing it myself, then I'd have to get a little bit larger. But it's totally doable. It's just, it takes money.
Yes, of course. Now, I read on your website that a question you get asked a lot, so I'm going to ask it too, because some of our listeners may be wondering this. Sure. Harvesting the milkweed seeds doesn't harm the habitat in any way for the monarch butterflies, does it?
Absolutely not. So by the time the seeds are actually being produced on the plant, that plant is in some kind of way out as far as dormancy. And also, when those seeds are being produced, at least here in the West, for the Western migration, monarchs are now actually in their overwintering spots. So they're either, for the Eastern migration, they're in Mexico. For the Western migration, they're here on the coast. So inland, they should not be inland and breeding. But as those leaves start to fall off, there's nothing for them to lay eggs on anyway. We're talking about native milkweed. We have some outliers for tropical milkweed that isn't the best for monarchs as far as it never goes dormant. So it keeps monarchs attracted to it year round when they should be basically overwintering, not breeding, waiting out the winter, just surviving the winter and being able to make their journey back. So, and that's a really good point, because we're saying, okay, let's use native milkweed. This is the milkweed that is most healthy for monarchs. And this is what we use. It's the leftover, it's the byproducts.
Wow. So are you the only one doing this? Do you have people working with you? How big is your undertaking?
I'm it. That's me. It was a big undertaking, but no, there are a couple companies in the US and a few more in Canada that actually use the fiber from the milkweed seed plant. So they're separating out the seeds with the fiber, and they're using that as like insulative material. So they're putting it in gloves, in lunch bags, and also bedding material. So the milkweed floss, is what they call it, is a much bigger market than the oil. But as far as, that's a huge undertaking. That's something that I couldn't do, because you need hundreds of acres of milkweed, which really doesn't exist except if you're in Canada. Definitely doesn't exist here in the US on that scale.
Wow. What have been you alluded to marketing earlier. What have been the biggest business challenges that you faced in bringing Monarch Botanica to life? And how are you navigating those at the moment?
Well, when I started, I had a little bit of money where I did hire a couple of marketing agencies to help guide me, because marketing is not my expertise. But I did find that even experts are confused whether, especially for a beauty product, do you put the beauty product first and all its accolades, or do you put what its mission is driven for? And they disagree. They're like, oh, you need to talk about how great this beauty product is and why people want to buy it. And somebody will say, no, you need to focus on the story. You need to talk about why you're helping monarch butterflies, why you created this. That was my personal kind of gut feeling. It's like, I just wanted to go with the truth. This is the way it happened. I didn't make this story up. This is the way this story came about. And that's what I wanted to stay with. And I was detracted by people saying, no, push the product. I did 2 or 3 website revisions, just changing it back and forth. That has been a huge challenge, because I feel like if I gained a couple steps, I took about 10 backwards.
I understand. I mean, first of all, marketing agencies don't always know what they're talking about, in my humble opinion.
Figured that out.
It's a slightly controversial viewpoint.
Yes.
You're not the first person to go through that either. I'm sure many of our listeners who have beauty brands will understand. It's not easy. I mean, speaking to your customers, what do you think they find more important? Is it the conservation or the cosmetics? Which comes first?
It's the conservation. It's the conservation. Everybody that I meet, but you have to think about what venue you're in. I will go to basically a show with other vendors, and they will be attracted to my booth, which is very Monarch centric, and there's butterflies everywhere, and they love Monarchs, and they go, "Oh, I want to tell you a story about what happened in my yard." And then they basically said, "Well, what are you selling?" And then I will say, "Well, I'm selling this milkweed seed oil beauty product." And they're like, "Oh, well, what's that?" So they're drawn to the butterfly 100%. But these are in vendor shows. Getting people to be drawn to something like that for an online, for social media, that's another, that's something else that I've tried to navigate is how much can I do myself in social media? It's a good time to talk about it because it's relevant. I thought about, I need a celebrity. I need an influencer. I need this. I need that. When I start looking at how either celebrity, influencer, or anything like that can fail overnight, and I think we all can see what's happening in the press. You make one wrong move and you're canceled. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to take that chance. I might not be a supermodel and I might not be an influencer and I might not have a lot of followers, but I'm telling exactly what's happening as far as how it came about, what's happening as far as education and the Monarch butterfly. And honestly, I don't trust anybody else. So, I mean, if they come forward, I'll definitely entertain a conversation, but this is my baby. This is to hand it over to somebody where I'm not 100% sure that they are invested in the mission and they believe what they're talking about. It's hard.
Yeah. It's all about authenticity. And to be honest, I wonder how much of a role influencers are going to play long term, because I think, and we're seeing this particularly on TikTok, it's the videos that are the most authentic that often resonate the most. So I think what you're doing is absolutely spot on. There'll be quite a few people listening who want to start beauty brands or who are formulators and who are very much aligned with your mission. And I'm sure there are people sat there nodding along thinking, I want to support what Chris is doing. But I think some of them will also be thinking about creating beauty brands that support conservation efforts. I think it's interesting because consumer behavior is evolving. I think a lot of people say that they want to support sort of ethical, environmental, sustainability-driven brands, but they don't necessarily always put their money where their mouth is. Have you seen consumer behavior evolving at all around your purpose-driven brand?
It's a really good point. I see the support that I get, but then I also see basically what is the successes for other people and what's a failure. So you're right. Brands, and if there's anything that I've influenced in that sense, that would be my greatest accomplishment. If I can just basically influence other brands to basically find a product that has a purpose and a cause and a mission and stick with it. I'll give you a great example. Burt's Bees. Burt's Bees started as a small company. They focused on, didn't focus on conservation, but it was bees and it was things like that. When they were sold to a bigger company, I think that message gets lost. So I never wanted to be, the Burt's Bees of Monarch butterflies. I want to be the Jane Goodall of Monarch butterflies. That's what I want. And in that sense that, I don't see my brand because I don't have enough sales. I don't see it as a failed brand, but I see it as a brand with purpose and definite opportunity in the future.
Love that. And yes, I would love to be Jane Goodall as well.
Me too. All of us.
Everyone listening is nodding along. So from your experience of working in the beauty industry, and you acknowledged this was not a background you had, it was not a background I had. In fact, it's not a background that most of our listeners have either. What do you think are the beauty industry's biggest sustainability blind spots right now?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think, if you talk about green beauty, clean beauty, unfortunately, I think the mission is often muddled as time goes on. You start out with the greatest intentions. If sales aren't great, you start to pivot. you always have to stay relevant. You always have to stay new for beauty industries because, it's so competitive out there. I think when they pivot, I think when they try to change the mission, that's when they lose the values. And I'm trying to, as hard as I can, trying to stay true to my values, which may not always be the path of success, but it is the path to making a difference in anything. If you are any kind of wildlife, any kind of social justice, if you're for some kind of mission like that, all I'm saying is that you need to stay true to your mission.
How are you measuring the impact of what you're doing?
The way I measure impact is physical, and it's actually getting habitat in the ground, the number of plants I plant, the number of milkweed plants I donate to schools, all the habitats that I have. And then also I'm doing more presentations, and I'm actually teaching a class coming up here in the next couple of weeks at a local university for extended education. As far as like tangible, I measure it by the amount of habitats I can create. And now it has turned to the amount of overwintering habitats for the monarch that I can save. Because all up and down the California coast, and this has been going on for years, but it happens one day, people complain about it, it goes by the wayside, and you forget about it. But we are losing the habitats that the monarchs need. And every year, as these populations decline even more so, that's where it's coming from. They have no habitat to survive the winter. Therefore, the populations shrink, get smaller. And then by the time they make their way back to breeding purposes, the numbers are very, very small. And that, it's a migratory species that you need that population to give rise to the next generations. And that's what we're losing. So that's how I'm measuring it. That's how I'm really fighting for it now. I hope I can make a difference.
Have the California wildfires, because you guys have had terrible problems with wildfires, have they had much of an impact as well on habitat loss for the monarch butterfly?
They have, when it happens right in the middle of the migration. So when butterflies are very small, they go in through clouds of smoke. A lot of times these trees that they're in, and a lot of times they're eucalyptus trees, which is a whole nother conversation, that it's not a native tree, but it's one of the ones over the past, hundreds of years that they have adapted to because it's a tree that survives. A lot of the native trees, with the increased heat that we're seeing for climate change, they're not surviving. There's pests and things like that. The eucalyptus tree is one of the biggest trees that can grow the biggest and protect them the longest. So basically saving those trees are a big deal in California. But it's a hard fight because as far as wildfires, people think, these trees are not only non-native, they're very flammable. I will tell you that the winds that we've had here in Southern California, when it's an 80-mile-an-hour wind or more, all trees are highly flammable. So that isn't really it. But honestly, habitat loss by probably development is the bigger driver. You've got coastal properties where people want to build on, they want the ocean views. That's predominantly where those trees are in the coastal zone.
So what's next for Monarch Botanica and for your nonprofit and all the work that you're doing? What's on the horizon in terms of products or partnerships or conservation ambitions?
Well, right now I'm continuing with the campaign donation. So, and this is nothing has really happened as far as this for Ventura City and this property owner that cut down the tree. Nothing has really happened as far as enforcement. This is going to be like the single most important example to show what happens as far as a property owner that says, okay, it's my private property, I can cut these down, but it's environmentally sensitive habitat area right in the coastal zone. It's required that you have to replace those trees and you have to mitigate that damage. Now, you can't replace a 90-foot tree that you just cut down. You just can't. So there has to be a way in California that we find the owners, protect the sites. That's going to be the big difference of how this is going to work out. So the money that I'm raising, we're doing events, we're doing flyers, it goes to things like that. Presentations I'm doing for free. That's part of that. But as far as the product, I can make a lot of other products with this oil. It's such a great oil. I don't have the funds to do it. So my one thought too is if I had a partner or an investor come in, I toy with the idea of being on Shark Tank, but I think they'd laugh me out of the studio because when I tell them of this amount of sales that I have every year, it might not be enough. So unfortunately for that, but I would definitely entertain somebody coming in and saying, look, I believe in this. I'll give them part of the company, but to make this full circle, a product for a purpose, a product with a mission, and that funds this cause to help the monarch butterfly, I would definitely be up for that. But right now I'm pushing forward and protecting these habitat sites and creating more habitat.
Well, who knows who might be listening, who might come out the woodwork and have a chat with you after this.
That'd be awesome.
Thank you for the work that you do. And thank you for coming on the podcast as well. I really appreciate you giving me your time and telling us all about your mission and all the amazing work that you've been doing. If anyone listening wants to come and donate or come and buy your products, because both routes seem to be equally valid, how can they do that? Where can they find you?
Well, we've got two websites. The mission and the conservation mission is at nativemonarchs.org. And then if they want to check out more about the product and it's more product centric, you can see the ingredients, and that is at Monarch Botanika, Botanika with a K.com.
Amazing. We will include those links in the show notes. So do go and follow Chris and check out all the amazing work she's doing. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, and all the very best with everything that you're working on. It sounds like a large undertaking, but it's super important. So thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine, for having me. I appreciate this, and I hope this helps get the awareness out there.
I'm sure it will. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Do you think more beauty brands should be putting conservation first? Please do leave us a comment on our social channels, as both the Formula Botanica team and I love hearing from you. And if you want to hear some more episodes about the topics we discussed today, please do delve back into the podcast archives. Some great examples for you to listen to include episode 231, in which I interviewed Dr. Sally Goldstone of Shalix Skincare on the way that the beauty industry should be approaching biodiversity. Sally is an ecologist. She has a wildflower meadow where she harvests her plants for her beauty products. Absolutely fantastic interview, and she's super knowledgeable. So go and listen to that one. Or check out episode 240, in which I put forward my opinion piece on the beauty industry and its biodiversity problem. And I set out the various ways that I think we should all change the way we approach regeneration and conservation in beauty. So very relevant to everything we talked about today. There's a wealth of information in our old episodes, and I do encourage you to go back and listen to them. So thank you for joining Chris and I for this latest episode of Green Beauty Conversations. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do leave us a 5-star review so that other people can enjoy these conversations too. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast app is, and stay tuned for the next episode. Follow Formula Botanica at Formula Botanica on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn. We're everywhere. And come and give me a follow at Lorraine Dallmeier on Instagram and LinkedIn. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com and sign up for our free online formulation course today.